tonight on CBC Vancouver News. New developments tonight in the weekend stabbing of 3 people in Chinatown.
Yet the BC Review Board just doesn't care. They hope to play experiments in our public.
Why the suspect now has many asking some serious questions. Plus, millions of dollars and thousands of jobs gone.
There's a lot of lost economic benefit we're losing in BC, and Alberta is definitely picking up a big portion of that.
How a shortage of industrial land in Metro Vancouver is pushing businesses out of province. And what some BC cities are doing to beat the heat for next year.
And we had one of the highest rates of people dying in the heat dome.
And the calls on the province to do more.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. New developments in the case of the psychiatric patient who was accused of stabbing 3 people in Chinatown. BC Review Board documents show Blair Donnelly was considered a significant threat to public safety. And as Lian Young reports, it's left advocates, experts, and politicians asking why he was allowed out in public.
The core question of how a violent, psychotic individual was released into community to attack innocent people is the question that needs to be answered.
To answer just that, Premier David Eby announced this afternoon he's tapped Abbotsford's former police chief, Bob Rich, to look into the case of Blair Evan Donnelly and others like him who have been found not criminally responsible because of a mental disorder. On Sunday, the 64-year-old who's incarcerated at a psychiatric hospital was on an unescorted day pass when he allegedly stabbed 3 strangers in Chinatown. Donnelly has been held at the hospital since 2008 when he was convicted of murdering his 16-year-old daughter. In 2009, during another day pass, he stabbed someone else.
I had the opportunity to read the decision of the BC Review Board, which when I read it, seems to clearly conclude that this man was a significant risk, shouldn't be released.
The BC Review Board will not release the decision, but in documents obtained by Check News and shared with CBC, it shows the board last assessed Donnelly in April. The panel concluded he was, quote, a significant threat, that he needed significant supervision to prevent further harm to the public, and a psychiatrist testified he was at a high risk of relapse. Advocates for victims' rights say there needs to be more accountability from the board.
They do not put the public safety as the highest priority, which is what they should do. And unfortunately, we get results as we've seen this past weekend.
Teixeira advocates for Darcy Clark and her family. Her 3 kids were murdered by their father, Alan Schoenborn, in 2008. He was also found not criminally responsible because he was in psychosis. When he was granted unescorted overnight leaves, the family had concerns, and the board then said he still posed a significant threat.
Yet the BC Review Board just doesn't care. They hope to play experiments in our public.
In the case of Donnelly, a lack of staffing and supervision might be to blame, says this SFU criminologist.
Hello, Mr. Eby. His white-hot fury, he can figure out ways to allocate funds to this portion of the mental health system.
But still, Gordon says someone made a poor decision. The Provincial Health Agency has refused any interviews, only sending a statement, which reads in part, many who are eligible for community access do not receive day passes for reasons including their illness. On the day of a scheduled outing, the patient is assessed to decide whether they are stable and well enough to visit the community. Premier Eby gave no timeline on the inquiry, only he wants results as soon as possible. Lian Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
People who live in a mobile home park in Chilliwack are stunned after the killing of 2 people last night. The RCMP says officers were called to the park on Chilliwack Lake Road just before 8 p.m. after someone reported hearing shots fired. Officers found a woman and a man dead inside a home. They then arrested another man nearby. He's believed to be in his 80s. It's not exactly clear what led to the killings, but the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team says police believe it stems from a dispute between neighbors. No charges have been laid. As of Monday, drug use is banned in parks, playgrounds, and spaces used by children. The federal government announced the new restrictions will be in effect during the decriminalization pilot project. As Mayor Baines reports, police chiefs and the mayor of Vancouver are applauding the move, but some say the rules needed to be clearer from the get-go.
After widespread criticism from municipalities, the federal government introduced a restriction to the decriminalization pilot project in BC following a request from the province. Possession of illicit drugs is banned within 15 meters of any playground, spray park, or wading pool or skate park. Premier David Eby says police will have the authority to arrest and charge people for doing so.
What is likely to happen is that they will use this authority to say, not here, you're in the wrong place. This is a place for kids. This is a place where people need to feel safe, and it's not okay for you to be using hard drugs in this place.
Eby says his government will also introduce legislation to add more public areas where people can't use hard drugs.
We are working on and will be introducing a bill in the legislature that clarifies, expands, and adds some areas that are not included in the Health Canada decision that was released today.
The announcement comes as the Union of BC Municipalities is set to meet next week. This week, BC United says it doesn't support decriminalization, a switch for leader Kevin Falcon. Surrey South MLA with BC United and former RCMP officer Eleanor Sturco says the pilot should have included the restrictions when it began.
Now, in response to a lot of political pressure that they've been getting, they've made an amendment to the agreement that they have with the feds. But the reality is that the horse is already out of the barn.
Sturco says the key is to have more treatment services available. The new restriction goes into effect on Monday. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
North America's first legally supervised injection site is celebrating its 20th anniversary. Insite, which opened its doors on Vancouver's downtown east side, has served millions of drug users since. Joel Ballard is taking a look at its legacy.
We did it, guys! We did it!
20 years ago, Insite opened its doors as North America's first legal supervised consumption site. Today, it continues to serve drug users, providing a safe way to inject under the watch of healthcare professionals.
Insite was important when it opened. It continues to be important in the current overdose crisis.
Over the last 2 decades, millions have visited. Many have been connected with detox and other healthcare services, and nearly 12,000 overdoses have been reversed.
I remember just coming here to use drugs is what I thought I was going to do. But it turned into something so much more and so much bigger.
Felicella says he visited Insite around 4,000 times over 10 years. One visit stands out in particular. He overdosed. When he regained consciousness, the nurse, shaken, told him she cared for him.
Burst into tears. And the many moments that led to that one moment where I just told her I don't want to do this anymore.
Felicella is more than a decade sober and now works as an advocate. Insite's journey hasn't been without its share of road bumps. The previous federal government attempted to withdraw its green light by removing its Health Canada exemption from prosecution under Canada's drug laws. The case was challenged, rising all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada.
The Supreme Court of Canada unanimously decided that it was unconstitutional to end Insite's exemption.
As the lawyer on the case, she says Insite paved the way for future supervised consumption sites.
Those legal cases helped this country and the international community to understand what harm reduction could do.
While it started as a way to prevent transmission from dirty needles, Insite has had to adapt. A new player entered the scene, fentanyl. Insite's data, crucial to understanding the deadly drug.
The Insite database is the most comprehensive database on overdoses in the world, and so we were able to basically show that your risk of overdosing in the current context is about 10 times what it was before fentanyl was introduced.
In the years ahead, this team says Insite will continue to adapt and continue to save lives. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
The federal Liberals wrapped up a caucus retreat today with an announcement about housing. They're dropping a tax in order to encourage the construction of more rental units.
Now, more and more Canadians are renting, and the cost of rent keeps going up. Canadians need more buildings intended for renters, not just condos that turn into Airbnbs or are sold to foreign buyers as financial assets. So, I'm pleased to announce that we are going to be removing the federal GST for the construction of new apartment buildings, and I'm encouraging all provinces to do the same.
The change would lower the cost of labor and material for home builders. The Liberals have been under increasing pressure to help provide more affordable housing. Today, the Conservative leader released his own plan that he says would fast-track construction of new homes. And a shortage of industrial land is costing Metro Vancouver thousands of jobs and millions of dollars, according to a new report. As Yasmin Gandam reports, this comes as more firms are choosing to invest in places like Calgary, where costs are lower and more land is available.
It's being called a crisis, with vacancy for industrial land at about 1% in Metro Vancouver. That's among the lowest in North America.
And there's just an extreme lack of supply for these users to locate here, and that's meant escalating costs for land and for leased product for industrial users, meaning they're looking in other regions. That's taking jobs and good productive uses for land out of the regional economy.
Over the past 4.5 years, the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade report estimates the region has lost more than 5.1 million square feet of space to Calgary alone. That's around 6,300 jobs gone. More industrial land is something the Port of Vancouver has been advocating for a while.
No, we were not surprised by this report. In fact, it's something that the Port Authority has long been advocating for at least the last 10 years and trying to highlight is the importance of preserving what industrial land remains in the region and finding ways to bring new industrial land to the market.
Businesses have been sounding the alarm for years. There's been a rezoning of industrial land for housing and mixed use, but the film industry has also played a role.
But really starting in 2015 with the emergence of film taking longer term space in Metro Vancouver, and then the growth of e-commerce starting in 2016 with Amazon and Winners and HomeSense and other key tenants taking large distribution centers in our market and really taking large blocks of industrial land supply out of the future supply. We've seen a significant growth in rental rates.
He adds people are finding it hard to find a place to live, but employers are also having a tough time setting up shop, which could potentially alter the economic landscape of Metro Vancouver.
We're about half of normal port cities in terms of industrial land supply. There's a lot of lost economic benefit we're losing in BC, and Alberta is definitely picking up a big portion of that.
The report recommends governments increase the protection and availability of industrial land and refocus planning to prioritize local housing, local food, and local production. It says industrial land contributes to more than 450,000 direct and indirect jobs and $50 billion in GDP. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, there's been some back and forth over the city of Vancouver deciding to increase license fees for short-term rentals. The fee would jump by about tenfold, from $109 to $1,000. Councillor Sarah Kirby-Young says the fee hikes are to offset property taxes and illegal suites.
People want us to keep property taxes reasonable, and they would prefer to see an increase in fees for specific services they use than to see higher increases in property taxes. So that's part of it. And then within the report, raising the short-term rental license fee more significantly than the other fees will allow additional resources to support enforcement activities.
But some Airbnb hosts are calling foul on the increase. This host has been renting his Airbnb in his home for 5 years, and he says he's disappointed in the decision to implement a dramatic increase, saying it will affect his family's ability to afford their home in Vancouver.
No, I don't feel that that's particularly fair. I feel that we're being lumped in with the professional Airbnb hosts that are buying investment properties and renting them out. And like I said, I'm not opposed to council taking action, but I think it needs to be done with a scalpel and not a sledgehammer.
Baldwin says he would prefer to maintain his Airbnb than rent out the suite to long-term tenants. This hike is part of a number of approved fee increases, which include hikes in Uber and dog license renewals. As I mentioned earlier, Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre was in Vancouver this morning talking about the housing crisis.
Vancouver is the third most unaffordable housing market in the world when you compare median income to median house price. Worse than New York City, worse than London, worse than Paris, worse than Singapore, a tiny island with 2,000 times more people per square kilometer than Canada.
Poilievre is laying much of the blame on the high cost of homes on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He says Trudeau has allowed inflationary measures and a mess of red tape to make it harder and more expensive to build housing, and that his government would live by its slogan of building homes, not bureaucracy. Well, this week, CBC News has published the findings of a summer-long heat project where reporters measured the temperatures inside homes across the country. That included nearly 10 here in Metro Vancouver, many of which reached unbearable highs for residents in July and August. Our John Hernandez takes us through how some of them fared and what some municipalities are doing to bring down the temperature.
A hot August day forces Burnaby's Joan Chandran to get creative.
I've got the fan. I've got a little cooling machine. I keep the drapes closed in the morning to keep the heat and the sun out.
Air conditioning isn't compatible with her older building, which she says has gotten hotter over the years.
I think it's because of the trees, more trees cut down, high-rise is built more concrete, and then of course there's the climate change thing.
The senior, one of 10 participants in a CBC News heat investigation, where indoor temperatures were measured with sensors over the summer. Chandran's home got as hot as 32 degrees. For more than half of the days measured, the temperature never dropped below 26, a temperature widely considered to be dangerous when endured for extended periods of time. In total, 9 participants experienced entire days where the temperature never dropped below the threshold.
Mentally, yeah, it's like my brain starts to fog.
New Westminster senior Michael Reppenhagen also dealt with temperatures as high as 32.
I've resorted to taking melatonin, just one under the tongue, and it's really not doing much. I can't sleep.
It's a nice overhang.
Participant Frey McRae moved away from this relatively new New Westminster building over the summer, the heat playing a big role in his decision to leave.
It makes me question why that building was built without air conditioning built into it. I don't know if it was just the purpose of having it cheaply made, but it wasn't an old building.
The BC Coroner's Service says it's investigating at least 3 heat-related deaths this summer, a drop in the bucket when compared to the 2021 heat dome where more than 600 people died. Still, officials say BC can expect similar heat events in the future, and as our data suggests, many homes are still ill-equipped to handle the heat.
And we had one of the highest rates of people dying in the heat dome.
In New Westminster, city staff are looking at bylaws for maximum temperatures in rental suites.
It doesn't mean that every unit has to have an air conditioner. It could be that it is a basement suite, or it is shading, or we have a heat pump in the building.
A move Vancouver City Council is also looking at.
It's an active file. It's something that we are increasingly alive to, and we're recognizing that it's only continuing to get worse.
Still, BC's top doctor says there's pros and cons to such municipal legislation.
Sometimes it's not possible to retrofit buildings, or it would be very expensive and would mean the building would be out of commission, which means people wouldn't have a place to live.
BC's housing ministry plans to update the provincial building code with cooling requirements for new buildings among the proposed changes. Meanwhile, BC's health minister stands by the recent air conditioner program, said to deliver 8,000 units over 3 years to those in need.
I think the number of total requests is around 4,000 so far. So we've made real progress there. But I think we're going to have to adapt everything we do.
Government efforts that have yet to make a difference in these homes where residents have weathered another hot summer and wonder if and when they'll get some relief.
We as a country should better look after its people.
2 summers come and gone since 600 lives were lost. A change in season, the only reprieve for many of BC's most vulnerable. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
That story from John Hernandez is part of the Urban Heat Project by CBC, our investigative unit. The data gathering spanned 8 weeks from late June to mid-August. The results came back, and along with them, more questions. Ali Patarge gives us a behind-the-scenes look at how CBC Vancouver set out to uncover the dangers of hot homes in Metro Vancouver.
It was late June of 2021 in British Columbia. A heat dome of unprecedented magnitude had the province grueling under its unrelenting grip. More than 600 people died, a large majority in the discomfort of their own homes.
We didn't understand that there was risk associated, and that I think is the part that we're going to be able to sort of address.
Fast forward to the summer of 2023. BC is still reckoning with that tragedy, and the struggle to stay cool at home continues to be a challenge. And it begs the question, are people any better equipped to withstand the heat? The CBC investigative unit wanted to get a clear picture of how hot it gets inside people's homes, to try to get a sense of inside temperatures during the day, and whether or not it gets any cooler at night.
We did so with heat sensors like this one. This is a scientific quality sensor that's able to measure humidity and temperature around the clock.
CBC bought 50 of these devices and set out to install them in apartments across 5 major cities in the country.
What struck me as a data person was that there was almost no data on how hot it actually got inside these people's places. And these people died inside.
If we install this in one place, it's able to muster data every 10 minutes, which you then download into your smartphone. The plan was to gather data for 8 weeks at the height of summer.
10 of these sensors remained in BC, while the rest were shipped off to Toronto, Montreal, Winnipeg, and Windsor. The results would be compared to the closest Environment Canada weather station. Then we had to find the people. They had to be in places where there is little or no central cooling system. We wanted to get a range of residents that included people of different backgrounds and age groups. We identified the hot spots of Metro Vancouver and reached out to senior and tenant organizations to connect us. We came up with our 10 residents, who we kept in touch with all the while the data is being gathered.
It was a really hot day in Vancouver today, very muggy, very sticky. And I'm really hungry. I want to make dinner, but my apartment is so hot. It's 33 degrees in here.
I'm outside one of the buildings where we managed to get a sensor in. Now, the reading on the sensor is dropping while we're out here right now, but obviously we're well into September as we're filming this. This reading would have been far higher in the middle of July, but at night it typically does cool down. But what we found is that the temperature doesn't drop at all inside when the sun goes down.
By mid-August, it was time to get the sensors back.
Tara, tell us about the data that was gathered.
Yeah, so right here you can see the data that was gathered. This is from a person in Vancouver, so it just gives us the date, the temperature, the humidity, and the dew point. And so we took all of this data from our 10 Vancouver participants and put it all together, and we were able to see, produce charts like this that showed us this blue and green line here is the indoor temperature, and then the orange line is the outdoor temperature. And you can see that the indoor temperature stays pretty high, even when the outdoor temperature kind of goes up and down like that.
The data spoke volumes, telling the stories of the elderly and people with disabilities at risk, living in old buildings that have trapped the heat inside their homes. What remains to be seen is what can be done to help people withstand the hot weather, in a race against climate change and more harrowing summers lying ahead. Ali Patarga, CBC News, Vancouver.
Okay, so Darius, as somebody who is looking at the heat on a daily basis, what do you make of the findings?
I think it's really shocking and concerning that inside it's so hot, because heat waves aren't usually thought of as a natural disaster, but they are the deadliest natural disaster, despite being invisible. So it makes them extra dangerous. And with that being said, we don't have dangerous heat in many places across the South Coast, but we do have temperatures well above seasonal. We're talking for downtown Vancouver and Victoria, around 2 degrees above seasonal. If we go further into the Fraser Valley, anywhere from 4 to 5 degrees above seasonal tomorrow. And if we move further into the interior, we get a picture of a really hot couple of days coming up, because temperatures here are anywhere from 5 to 7 degrees Celsius above where they'd usually be this time of year, going up as far as Williams Lake and Prince George, we're talking relatively high temperatures for this time of year, which is not great in terms of how dry things are right now. On Saturday, those temperatures stay high, and then on Sunday, we do see another low pressure system move in that should bring temperatures down at least somewhat. For the coast, that means temperatures returning back to where we'd usually see them this time of year, anywhere from 18 to 21 degrees Celsius for places like Victoria and Vancouver. And then for further in the interior, they come down just a few degrees to the mid-20s for the most part. So that reprieve will be coming, and it should be happening sort of Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Those days will be a bit cooler than what we're seeing right now. And for here in Vancouver, overnight, we see that sun stay out tomorrow morning. We see the clear skies, no cloud to speak of, and then clear skies tomorrow for what will be a pretty sunny morning heading into a hot and sunny day.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dargus.
Thank you.
Well, they're among the most criticized buildings in the province, the dreaded school portable. So with that, Justin McElroy has decided to meet the people who build those portables in BC, and he's finding out a lot has changed and not all portables are created equal.
Every year, more and more portables are needed across British Columbia for schools. But what do they look like, and how do they come together? Let's find out. This is Fort Modular. It's one of the biggest portable construction facilities in BC.
Well, I would like to hire about 60 more people right now.
There's just that much demand?
Yeah.
These portables are constructed over the course of several weeks before they're shipped out across the province.
Everything's pre-framed in a panelized process at the back of the shop. You know, at the very early stages, you'll be framing, and then cranes come and assemble the walls, floor panels, and ceiling panels. Electrical would come in, and then there's finishing and exterior siding and roofing. And as they make its way through the factory floor, each trade kind of puts in its 2 cents.
Portables are designed based on the needs of each school district. Some of the differences are just around geography. That says Kelowna. Is that heading to Kelowna?
These ones would be going to Kelowna, correct. The depth and width of the beam is structurally engineered, designed for the snow loads of each location. So Kelowna would have a lighter snow load than, I would say, Cowichan on Vancouver Island. Is obviously going to be wet snow, heavier snow load.
But a lot of them are around how much school districts are willing or able to pay. What are some of the common variations or things where you go, all right, this one has things A, B, C versus D, E, F?
If a school district wanted a classroom that had 3 handicap washrooms, a high-end ventilation system, and all this stuff, it's doable and it can be done. It's just going to obviously be a more expensive build.
What's a general range for sort of a bare bones portable versus a high-end one?
Very loaded question.
That's what we do sometimes.
Yeah. So base lowest model possible, you're probably about 140K. A realistic average currently right now is plus or minus around 200,000 per classroom.
That's part of the reason why not all portables are created equal, but another issue is more generational.
Late 80s, mid 90s, the idea was to build the most economical solution for a temporary facility for about a year or two, and then it was going to find a new home or be moved off site, and that was the end of its life. Problem is, those ones are still in use now, having problems, but for no fault of what was ordered or built at the time.
So when you hear people dump on portables and say, this is a substandard experience for kids and why are we doing this so much, what goes through your mind?
I do understand the problem and the beef with them. And I mean, if I had a kid in school and they got put into a portable that was built in 1989 and, you know, minimal insulation and it's got poor ventilation and all these other issues, I see that's where the problem lies. Those were designed for a short-term temporary solution, and they're still being used. So, but that being said, anything new or built, there would be no problem. It's as good as anything.
But portable perception problems are out of their control. All they can do is send them out into the wild.
Coming up, the E. coli outbreak in Alberta daycares has many concerned about infectious diseases among kids. We speak live to an expert on how E. coli can impact the body and whether something like that can happen here in Metro Vancouver. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. An Ontario school board wants to get rid of books that were in poor shape, outdated, or non-inclusive. But the rollout caused major confusion, leading to thousands of books being removed. And as Angelina King explains, this left students starting the school year with half-empty library shelves.
I did go to the fiction section of my library, and I saw
this: empty shelves on the first day of school.
And sections that have been completely erased.
Raina Takata says more than half of the books at her Mississauga school library are gone, including her favorites like Harry Potter and The Hunger Games.
Taking away books without anyone's knowledge is considered censorship.
CBC News has learned thousands of books have been removed within the Peel District School Board, many likely ending up in the landfill. Like most libraries in Canada, Peel schools are to weed out books that are damaged or outdated, but the board is going further. According to an internal document reviewed by CBC, books that aren't inclusive or reinforce racist content or stereotypes also have to go. That was put into place in response to a ministry directive mandating the board undergo a diversity audit as part of a review on systemic discrimination within the board.
But it appears that was misinterpreted. At first, neither Ontario's Education Ministry nor the minister's office would comment for the story. But after it was published, the minister told CBC he told the board to end the process immediately.
In a statement saying, Ontario is committed to ensuring that the addition of new books better reflects the rich diversity of our communities. It is offensive, illogical, and counterintuitive to remove books from years past that educate students on Canada's history, anti-Semitism, or celebrated literary classics.
The process itself rolled out wrong.
Trustee and school board chair David Green says after trustees learned about the process, they implemented changes in hopes of ensuring transparency and accountability. Now, if a book is tossed for not being inclusive, staff must record it.
We want to make sure it's done properly, that all students feel included and part of the process.
So I have talked to a few of my friends.
But so far, they don't feel that way.
And our decisions and thoughts haven't been considered.
I'm worried about my chance with other students when coming up to university that have access to all those books that I don't have.
CBC asked the school board whether it will adhere to the minister's request and stop the process, but didn't hear back. We previously asked the board several questions like how many books have been thrown out and how much it'll cost to replace them, but they weren't addressed. Instead, the board said it's working to ensure books are culturally responsive, inclusive, and diverse. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
The E. coli outbreak in Alberta is now being linked to a shared kitchen in Calgary used by daycares. The bacteria has sickened more than 300 kids. For more on how E. coli can affect kids and others, we're joined live by Dr. Srinivas Murthy. It's been a while. Thank you for joining us tonight. Dr. Murthy, this Alberta situation has gone from bad to worse pretty fast. How is it that E. coli spreads so quickly?
Yeah, with this outbreak and this E. coli is in a lot of places, but this specific strain of E. coli is what's causing these kids to have problems. And it's a strain that releases toxins into your gut and causes the problems that have led to all of the hospitalizations that we've seen.
The cluster in Alberta is quite large, and like I said, it grew really quickly. How vulnerable is BC to something like that?
What I will say is that this shouldn't happen. And this shouldn't happen really in Alberta. It shouldn't happen really anywhere. And it doesn't happen because of the hard work of all of the public health professionals and food inspectors and Health Canada regulations that go into all of our food to keep it safe. And so with that intact, we shouldn't be at risk here in British Columbia. And it's important to really emphasize the importance of all of that inspection that happens. I know that that kitchen in Calgary has had lots of problems identified. And it's important that we really emphasize the importance of public health here.
Absolutely. Good to know. Why is it that kids are more vulnerable?
Yeah, it's a good question. And we don't really have a good answer to that. For this specific bacteria, we usually see these problems in kids under 5 who get infected. We don't see many cases across Canada, but we do see a handful. And in a very small handful, we see it progress to really bad disease requiring kidney replacement with dialysis. I really worry about those kids who are in Alberta Children's right now getting dialysis, and hopefully their kidneys recover over the next couple of days and weeks.
Yeah, there's 20 of those kids that have severe kidney disease in Alberta at the moment. I want to talk medications a little bit, because I'm hearing that medications can actually make the situation worse, increasing the risk of complications when it comes to E. coli. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah, we don't really have any good treatments for this specific bacteria to prevent the kidney disease that we're seeing. All we really have is the usual things like making sure the child is well hydrated and feels well. Giving medications like antibiotics may actually make it worse, and giving medications that slow down the diarrhea will also probably make it worse. And so really it's just a good old-fashioned supportive care and lots of fluids, and why some kids progress to severe disease is something we don't really know.
Yeah, so probably pretty important to differentiate it early on as being E. coli rather than some other sort of diarrhea or other sickness, I'm guessing.
Definitely, and in Calgary, they're really working hard at making sure they get all the testing available all over the city to make sure those kids are identified early. The parents can look out for worsening of symptoms.
Dr. Srinivas Murthy is an infectious disease expert and pediatrician. Thank you so much for being on the show tonight live with us.
Thanks, Anita.
The disaster in Libya is being felt around the world. Coming up, we hear from a local man mourning the loss of family and friends.
Welcome to Vancouver's newest campsite. Hi there.
Hi there.
Comfortable?
Yeah?
Oh.
We got 2 of us. You want to wait? Hey, wakey. Yeah.
This little tent is set at the doorstep of BC's largest tent. It first showed up on Monday but was ordered out because there was a trade show going on at the stadium. The temporary home has all the amenities, a cooler of food and pop, bedding, and a stereo. Its occupants are waiting for tickets.
Rolling Stones.
It's Wednesday.
So, I missed the last one by 3 people. I ain't going to miss this one by 3 people. I'm here. And I'm staying until I get them.
Don, what if by some fluke you don't get any?
What if by some fluke I don't get any? Don't ask.
Right now, 2 other roommates are gone to shower, but when the ticket booth opens Saturday morning, these guys will be first in line.
By Saturday, the lineup will probably be down there by the end of those pylons.
You'll just be laughing at the people who are at that end.
Well, I don't know. I'd be here for 2 days, 3 days. They'd be laughing at me, I think.
If the guys were members of a priority ticket club, they could have got their seats this morning.
We had people actually lined up 2 days ago.
How many tickets did you sell in it?
It was 800 or 900.
Well, right now I got row 2 on the floor.
Within an hour, a lot of those best seats in the house were already in the hands of brokers and selling for 4 times their original price.
I sold a couple to my friend Joe from Boston, and he wanted to take a girl to the concert, so.
I paid $300 each for them. Row 5.
Once the concert is sold out, these tickets will be worth a lot more.
Maybe somebody might offer me $500.
What I really think they're going to sell for, I really think they're going to sell anywhere between $500 and $1,000.
So at $300, it's a steal?
It's a steal. Somebody comes along, they're sold.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
definitely.
yeah, so much for your big date.
Well, for $1,000, goodbye date. For $1,000.
Oh, no. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Did you hear that, Vivian? Goodbye.
There's a dramatic jump in the number of dead after catastrophic flooding in eastern Libya. A local humanitarian group says more than 11,000 people have been killed. That figure could grow as many others remain missing. The hard-hit port city of Derna is overwhelmed with bodies and is burying the dead in mass graves. Recovery teams are still scouring the ruins, and divers are searching the sea for more victims. About 10,000 people are missing, and at least 35,000 are homeless, all after a huge storm caused 2 dams to burst Sunday night. Help is starting to reach the most affected areas from neighboring countries. Italy and Germany are among the nations to send humanitarian aid. The UN is pledging $10 million and calling on the global community for assistance. The U.S. says it's working through the UN and Libyan authorities to send relief funds. Well, Libyan Canadians in BC are struggling to come to terms with the extent of the destruction. One man who lost family members in the flood is also mourning the loss of the town he grew up in.
These kind of experiences, it's very, very difficult to prepare for them. It was totally unexpected, although there was a little bit of a warning, but still shocking nevertheless. And the people that I've been talking to in the past couple of days, I tell you, there's so much shock and so much trauma going on in the society, and definitely so much mourning. It's a town, definitely, like I said, I haven't seen in a few months, but it's in my heart and it's in my mind, and I know it street by street. And unfortunately, it's no longer, it's not there. What they call the area that's been described as affected, they call it the old town. Well, for me, that is Derna, because the old town that's where we grew in. That's the only Derna I knew. And that's where all the families of Derna grow in and raise their kids. And it's such a deep story, and it's a story of mourning and of loss. But I always remind myself, also we will have to find an opportunity for hope.
And in St. John, New Brunswick, the entire city has been asked to shelter in place to avoid a cloud of hazardous smoke spewing from a stubborn fire at a scrapyard. As Harry Forrestal explains, for some residents, the facility was already notorious.
An alarming wake-up call for residents of West St. John. A 30-foot-high inferno of shredded automobiles, sending flames billowing into the sky, firefighters struggling just to contain the blaze. And just across the street, some very worried neighbors.
I've never seen anything like this before. It's like a volcano. Look up in the sky, like that is amazing to see.
Obviously, this is a concern to people with the chemicals that are involved, the plastics and rubber products that are involved in this. And it sounds like there's many explosions.
Barely a kilometer from uptown St. John, where thick drifting smoke forced 3 schools to close for the day and prompted this warning from local health authorities.
I strongly recommend that people across the city of St. John, along with those who see or smell smoke in neighboring communities, so outside the skirt of St. John, should shelter in place whenever possible until the fire is brought under control.
American Iron and Metal CEO Herb Black today blamed the fire on a failed security system. He said hackers shut down the site's outdoor cameras last spring. But this is only the latest incident in the Montreal company's troubled history in St. John. Neighbors have long complained about the recycling center's incessant noise, its window-rattling explosions, fires, and 2 workplace deaths.
At the end of the day, it's a real demonstration of how something that's heavy industry doesn't mix in a residential community.
But the port is owned by the federal government. St. John City bylaws don't apply here, and there's no indication American Iron and Metal will be moving anytime soon. Harry Forrestal, CBC News, Fredericton.
India's southern state of Kerala is seeing a new outbreak of the deadly Nipah virus. This is the 4th time, and it has killed 2 people. As Salima Shivji reports, there is a lot of concern because of its high fatality rate during past outbreaks.
Officials are on alert and taking precautions in the southern Indian state of Kerala because of this Nipah virus outbreak, particularly in the Kozhikode district. Some schools are closed, banks as well as government offices. Shops are shuttered and the streets are a bit empty. People are a little nervous, and not just because of the loss to business, says this shopkeeper. After COVID, now we have this new virus and everything is shut again, he says. The Nipah virus spread through contact with fluids of infected bats, pigs, or people is rare but has a high mortality rate. This virus outbreak, Kerala's fourth since 2018, has already killed 2 people, and confirmed infections are slowly rising as officials work to contain the spread. Previous outbreaks do paint a scary picture. During the first one 5 years ago, 21 out of 23 infected people died because of the Nipah virus. Now, authorities say that in this case, they are taking every precaution possible. Kerala's health minister says all of the close contacts of those infected are being tracked and they are in isolation. At least 700 people have been confirmed and identified as people who have had some sort of contact with either the victims or those who are infected, and they are being tested for this virus. Police are monitoring vehicles at checkpoints, and the state has set up containment zones in the district where the infections are clustered. The federal government is also rushing in help, sending in experts to help with monitoring the spread of the virus as well as with contact tracing, while infectious disease specialists are working to study the strain of this virus known to be so deadly, with the state on high alert. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
At 6:45 tonight, local time, a live look at Halifax, where it's calm tonight, but where people are preparing for a big storm. How Hurricane Lee might impact the Maritimes is next.
Dalbir Bala bought this Ford F-150 Lightning to save on fuel and use cleaner energy. Just 12 hours into his first big road trip with family through the United States, he ditched the electric vehicle.
It was towing, finding a towing company, getting it towing it over there. Yeah, it was really a nightmare frustration for us.
The $115,000 truck has an estimated range of 515 kilometers. Bala planned to power up at fast charging stations between Winnipeg and Chicago. The first charge in Fargo took 2 hours and cost him $56. Trouble started at the next stop in Minnesota.
It was showing in my screen, faulty connection.
Faulty connection.
And it was not charging.
Running low on battery, Bala headed for the next closest fast charger. That one in Elk River wouldn't work either. He got the EV towed and continued the trip with a gas-powered rental vehicle.
And that's when we decided that, you know what, we don't want any more distraction or any frustration.
EV drivers rely on chargers like this one. It's not known why Bala couldn't get a charge at the first station in Minnesota. The company that runs the charger there says it was working. The other one in Elk River was offline due to maintenance.
Some of the reliability of those chargers is less than ideal.
Winnipegger Ross Redman owns 2 EVs and is a member of the Manitoba Electric Vehicle Association. The group says more focus is needed on maintenance and technical support at charging stations, but Redman remains confident in the vehicles. He drove his 2014 Tesla Model S from Vancouver to Winnipeg in December over 2 days.
Shortest charge on the way home from Vancouver was 7 minutes. My longest charge was 21 minutes.
He stopped at Tesla supercharger stations, which are different than the ones compatible with most other vehicles. Ford of Canada says drivers of its vehicles will get access to Tesla's network of chargers next year and an additional 4,000 fast chargers. That's little comfort to Bala right now.
And to have a, more than $100,000 of a car to just only drive in the city doing nothing with it, that was not expected.
He picked up his truck on the way home from Chicago and is just using it to get to work, but he won't take it on any more long trips anytime soon. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Hey, I'm Johanna Wagstaff.
And hi there, I'm Rohit Joseph.
And we're asking for 10 minutes of your day to go through the 10 things that the UN recommends we can all do when it comes to climate change.
Please don't leave.
No.
And also, the things aren't new.
We are just wired to not do them.
We promise you to help you figure out your brains, and you and your people can make better choices to combat climate change.
10 Minutes to Save the Planet is available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Almost a year after Fiona tore through Atlantic Canada, many across the region are once again bracing tonight as they watch Hurricane Lee push closer. The powerful storm is growing in size, expected to make landfall on Saturday. Now, Lee is not expected to be a repeat of Fiona, but officials are warning people to take it seriously. Here's Shayna Luck on how some are getting ready.
But this bit here, they would split it from where it's...
Daniel McIntyre knows all too well how much destruction storms can bring.
It was quite devastating when we seen this arrangement, what happened with the force of the water.
He's still repairing damage from torrential rain and floods in July as he watches Hurricane Lee get closer.
Thanks, guys.
And he's not alone. In Halifax, long lines as many stock up before the storm's landfall Saturday. New Brunswick also telling residents, get ready.
I do want to stress the importance of not being complacent with this storm.
At this marina near Moncton, the president of the Port Authority says there's no knowing what will happen after the last two hurricanes came in from different directions.
We've had major storm surges, and we've been lucky in the past overall, but we've also got some pretty big damages in the past, and it's just better safe than sorry.
And while PEI is expected to take less of a hit, officials are still opening reception centers for people who need to shelter.
We must stay sensible and be prepared for whatever comes our way.
All this almost one full year after the region was pummeled by Fiona. While memories of that disaster are still fresh, Lee is not expected to bring the same devastation.
But in terms of intensity, nothing like we saw with Fiona last year.
Back in Bedford, Daniel McIntyre says he'll be ready.
We've had storms here before. I mean, it's Nova Scotia you're in, so we'll see what comes from it.
Knowing that whatever happens, someone will have to pick up the pieces after. Shayna Luck, CBC News, Halifax.
Time now once again to check in with Darius Madavi, and you've been tracking the storm. Where is it at this point?
Well, we're seeing it move up the east coast of the U.S., staying quite far offshore, but I want to emphasize what we heard earlier. This is one of the 5 biggest hurricanes of the last 2 decades. Now, it is losing strength as it moves further north, and size does not equal strength, but I think it's important to know that the impacts are going to be very widely felt regardless of where it makes landfall. Although we're not entirely sure yet where that will be because we're watching the storm move up, and right now the track has it just grazing Nova Scotia and then just moving through New Brunswick briefly, but that has changed quite a bit over the last couple of days, and it keeps shifting west and east, so we'll see exactly where it ends up. We'll have a better idea probably by tomorrow because it is expected to make landfall by Saturday. Winds are currently around 140 kilometers per hour. By the time it reaches land, it will probably be closer to 100 kilometers per hour, but we still have quite a ways to go before we understand exactly what the impacts will be. We have very high amounts of rainfall already falling, and over the next several days, we can expect that rainfall will only increase. Up to 100 millimeters are expected in some areas. With that being said, rainfall is going to be quite significant. There is a severe risk of flooding. We could use some of that rain, although not nearly that much, here in BC. We are seeing some of it move through the northwest today. We're going to see a little bit more just graze as we have some more systems slowly move further south. A few systems passing through the weekend that'll each move a little bit further, but we can't look this far out with that fine-grained model. We have to zoom out a little bit and look at this, and we might see some rain happening in the Fraser Valley, so around a 60% chance for that rain happening in the Fraser Valley by Monday evening. But for the rest of the Lower Mainland, it doesn't look like we're going to see much. We are clear for smoke tomorrow, so that's good news, just widespread in the northeast. We have that clearing pattern we talked about with those high temperatures happening through the province tomorrow. And here in Vancouver, we just have a few days of sunny skies before temperatures come down early next week and we get some cloud moving in.
Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, is there life outside of Earth? NASA has been probing unexplained sightings. The evidence or lack thereof is next.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. With the changes to how Canada is able to access journalism online and on social media, we want to assure you that when you're looking for CBC News, you'll always be able to find us. Wherever you are in BC, local news, breaking stories, and the latest from around the world is at your fingertips any time of the day with the free CBC News app and online at cbcnews.ca. Download the CBC News app and stay connected wherever you are.
NASA has released the findings of a year-long study into unidentified flying objects, or UFOs. It's actually renamed them to Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, or UAP. The space agency says the top takeaway from the study is the truth is out there, and there's a lot more to learn. But it does say this.
The NASA independent study team did not find any evidence that UAP have an extraterrestrial origin. But we don't know what these UAP are. That's why I'm announcing that NASA has appointed a NASA Director of UAP Research.
NASA says there are so few high-quality observations that no scientific conclusions can be drawn. It says it wants to shift the conversation about UAPs from sensationalism to science. Well, whatever you believe, maybe we'll one day find out the truth. Thanks so much for watching CBC Vancouver News tonight. I am away tomorrow, but Leanne Young will be here, and I'll see you next week.